Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our academic writing and research course. Today, we're going to focus on how to structure our literature review, and we're going to talk particularly about the funnel structure and how we can work on identifying gaps within existing studies. So let's go ahead and let's get started. So we're going to talk about the purpose of a literature review. We're going to talk about that structure. We're going to practice summarizing and synthesizing academic sources. And in our skills lab, we're going to work on compound and complex sentences. So I want you to take a moment and think about what the hardest part of writing a dissertation or a research article is for you. Is it the literature review? Is it the introduction, the methods, the discussion, the conclusion? And why do you think so? I think for me, certainly the literature review is the most time consuming. It's also something that's going to be framing the entirety of our study, the previous research that's been done. So for me, this is the most difficult part. So hopefully today's lesson is going to shed a little light on how you can work through this process and how you can better organize your time as you're drafting your own literature review. So remember, your literature review is not just summaries. You're not saying this person did this, then this person did this, then this person did this. You want to synthesize the information. So hopefully you're going to be connecting previous research to your study. So we've talked in this course about writing being a social practice. So I want you to think about how your literature review serves to be a conversation between the scholars that have come before you. So you can pause the video and take a moment and reflect on that. And when you come back, we'll go ahead and we'll continue. So when I think about this, when I think about how our literature review really serves as a scholarly conversation, we're taking all the studies that have been done by scholars before us and we're weaving them together, right? We're talking about where there are broad areas of agreement. We're talking about where there have been discrepancies or contradictions or shortcomings. And we're also shedding light on areas that have been relatively unexplored. And we're going to talk more about different types of gaps that we can identify in the literature. But we're really weaving together the work of previous scholars. So again, we're not just listing this study was done, then this, then this, then this. We need to really integrate and synthesize the work of the scholars that have come before us. And then you're going to add your voice as a scholar. So your literature review should be your second chapter. And in your introduction, you're going to talk about the need for your study. You're going to talk about the background. You're going to talk about the significance of the study, the need for the study, and the purpose of the study. What do you intend to accomplish or explore by doing your research? Your literature review really should be exhaustive. And we're going to talk about the difference between a dissertation literature review and a literature review for a research article in just a moment. But your literature review and your dissertation really needs to exhaust all the research that has come before you, and you're going to end with the gap that exists in the literature. And that is how your study hopefully will fit in. So how would we structure our literature review based on that? Well, I've been talking for several weeks about that funnel structure, and that's exactly what we want to do. We want to start with a big picture perspective. That's the widest part of our funnel or our cone there. Then we want to take a more focused view and then a further focused view before we finally wind up with the gap. So as you're doing that, as you're moving towards your gap, as you're presenting the studies that have come before you, make sure that you're highlighting findings that have been contested or areas that are unexplored, especially if it's you who intends to explore these areas, right? Because what you want to do is you want to establish that gap in the literature and then talk about how you're going to fill it. So Most commonly, the literature review is organized around large themes, and they become increasingly narrow, increasingly more focused until we arrive at that gap. So, when we take a look at these four elements here, I want you to put them in order in terms of how they would appear in the literature review. We've got our gap or contradiction, our broad context, your study, and the focused theme. So, how would you put those in order? So, the first thing that you're going to start with is our broad context or our big picture. Then you're going to move to a more focused theme before identifying a gap or a contradiction. And then you're going to get to your study and how we fill that gap. So, this would be ordered in the following sequence. So, what might create a gap in the study? Well, there are several different ways we can identify gaps in our study. One might be a particular population that hasn't been explored. Maybe people have explored the area that you're interested in, but they've only done quantitative research, and you're looking to add to the literature by viewing this problem through a qualitative lens. So there are many different ways that you can create a gap, and we're going to talk about four of them right now. The first is an empirical gap in the literature. There simply has not been enough data gathered. The second is theoretical. There are certain ideas that just haven't been explored yet. Methodological, and I alluded to this earlier, perhaps there have only been quantitative studies done, and there's a need for a more qualitative approach. Or population, a particular group has been ignored. For example, this has been done in a K-12 context, but we haven't done anything with students at the university level. So let's take a look at some examples here. Although there are several models of academic writing development, little theoretical work connects these to identity formation in multilingual scholars. And we've got a clue there. This is a theoretical gap in the literature. Most research on dissertation supervision relies on surveys. There's little use of ethnographic or longitudinal methods. We've got a clue right there. Little use of these types of methods, so that's methodological. The experience of part-time PhD students in managing writing deadlines are rarely addressed in the literature. So right there, we're talking about part-time PhD students. That's a population that has yet to be explored. No study has yet applied an ethnographic approach to investigate feedback practices in graduate writing workshops. Methodological. No one's done an ethnography. Existing studies on writing feedback mostly present results, but do not provide data on how revisions actually occur. So we've got a lack of data here. This is empirical. Okay. So now let's talk about synthesizing sources. So this is more than just summarizing. When we synthesize sources, we show relationships between the different studies that we're citing. This could be agreement, right? When there's a broad area of agreement between scholars. It could be contrast or dissent. It could talk about how ideas have developed with subsequent studies. So I think personally, synthesizing is something that just takes practice. When we initially start to do this, when I first had to do this as a master's student, it was quite difficult for me because it was new. But as it's something that you do more frequently, it becomes much easier. So let's take a look here at how we might do this. So we've got three studies here, and I'm going to let you pause the video and read through these. I'm not going to read through them all, but we've got, we've got Smith, Lee, and Zhang talk about feedback in graduate writing programs. So we want to talk about the relationships that exist here. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to highlight some of the important information that I see. I'm going to start with Smith here. Um, he says that this was survey data, so this is a quantitative study. It was quantitative correlational study. Um, there was a positive relationship between peer feedback and perceived writing improvement. He talked about sessions providing a safe space, and he said these were especially valuable when the instructor feedback is limited. Lee, on the other hand, here, he did interviews, so we've got some type of qualitative study. He says its effectiveness varies. He talks about the emotional encouragement, but he also says that other students feel advice is vague or overly critical. So right there, I see a contrast. Okay, so Smith is talking about a positive relationship, a positive correlation between peer exchange and perceived writing improvement. Not actual writing improvement, but perceived writing improvement. Whereas Lee says that students might benefit from emotional encouragement, but he's saying others feel that the advice is vague or overly critical. As we go on to, oh, and here also he says he emphasizes the importance of facilitator guidance. And this contrasts with the work of Smith, who says that this method is most effective when the instructor is absent or his or her feedback is limited. And Lee is saying, no, there actually needs to be that guidance. John goes on and says that anonymous peer review systems have shown promise in increasing the depth of revision. And he did a case study and he found that students were more willing to give and accept critical comments, and that it can reduce cultural barriers to honest feedback. So here we can see that Lee says that many students find this feedback overly critical. However, Zhang says that creating an anonymous peer feedback system may make students more willing to give and accept critical comments. So we can pick out the relationships between these different scholars here. And there's much more here. We could go much further. So you can certainly pause the video and work through that on your own. So I want you to think about your dissertation or your article. And, 4 sentences is a little tough, but maybe 6 or 8 sentences. Share the context, a more focused theme in the literature, what you feel is missing, and how your study will fit into that. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about compound and complex sentences. Compound sentences are sentences where we're combining two independent clauses with a coordinating conjunction. For and nor, but, or, yet, or so. Complex sentences, on the other hand, share a independent clause together with a dependent clause. And they use subordinating conjunctions like because, although, since, when, and if. So let's take a look at some of these here. I wanted to watch the movie, but I didn't have time. That's a compound sentence. Because I studied hard, I passed the test. That is complex. She likes tea and he prefers coffee. That's a compound sentence. I couldn't go outside since it was snowing. That's a complex sentence, since. The dog barked, yet no one was at the door. That's a compound sentence. If you feel sick, stay home. That's a complex sentence. If you feel sick is a dependent clause. He finished the project, so he left early. That's a compound sentence. Although she was tired, she kept working. That is a complex sentence. I want to visit Japan, but I need to save money first. That's a compound sentence. And when the bell rang, the students left. That's a complex sentence. Okay, so thank you all so much for joining me for today's video. I'm going to make a supplementary video where I am going to share the difference between a literature review in a research article and a literature review in a dissertation. So please remember to like, subscribe, and comment on the video, and I'll see you in our next video at the Language Arts Gallery.